Let me start recording and I will share my screen. All right, so today in general, we have a lighter agenda. I think the main purpose is just to sync for the progress between us. So again, there's a KubeCon talk I'm gonna give in next week. For those of you gonna attend the KubeCon, welcome to attend the session. So let's check the progress. So Jason, I think you did both, right? So pilot done, mixer changes also done.
Yeah, the and then test is waiting to be approved.
Okay.
It's that code is done. The only piece that's left is the documentation, which shouldn't be.
Yes. So once you're done, maybe send an email to everybody about like beta ready.
Yeah, I think we'll want to enable it. It's off by default right now for 1.8 or 0.8. We'll turn it on by default in 0.9. So we have a month or two of testing before 1.9.
Okay, sounds good. So Galley, as far as I know, the CRD sync is almost done. So I would say 90%, but I will give all the final call because he's not joined today. The public internal format, we had a discussion, it's done. So you can look into the design doc. I can go overview of that design later in the meeting. The testing framework, I think also still experimenting it, maybe in prototyping stage. Design service config, I have started. So what I've done is just putting a service field into the Galley branch and kind of play around. And right now, just kind of copy a few configs, the networking configs, and see if it's kind of fits by itself without much translation. So we can kind of get in the flow works. So I would say both is in progress. Consumer config is no. So package CRD reorg pilot, so we stop this work. So I need to do some of the cleanup. And the reorg mixer, Christopher, have you planned to submit a CL?
We have the one, but it really only just changes for multiple types. And I didn't know if we're also going to halt that, considering we've halted the pilot stuff. I think you said we can clean it up, but I don't know if it's still useful in general.
I think given the state of those PR, I think it's a non-op if you don't use multiple groups. So maybe it's a kind of benign change we can add in. Maybe eventually, if there's anything happens, we may end up using it, or you can just abandon this PR. So I have no preference on either way you choose.
Does this PR reorganize the type so that you have an instance and a handler type rather than multiple handler variants and instance variants?
It doesn't really touch that at all. That was what Endar was looking at. All it was really doing was not hard coding to a config.
I don't know. Longer term, so later on we'll talk about config distribution. If we don't end up using CRDs at the component level, that may look different. You might still have the notion of different groups of config, but after Maynard's change, it would be far fewer kinds, and those kinds might be, you wouldn't consume it through a CRD. So it might be good to wrap that up. So there's a nice place to stop it. So to do unnecessary work.
Can you repeat that last part? You're saying that we should just make
If
it
it's
configurable, or
stop it, we probably should. We don't want to do a lot of unnecessary refactoring.
I think
Okay,
Jason is recommending is maybe if Monday you're gonna do some changes eventually, maybe abandon this PR might be an option.
yeah, I think that's what I was trying to figure out before. If we're already going to be changing this and it's going to be a no up right now, is it still worthwhile to have it in?
Okay, so I don't think that there's anything coming out of this. So let's move into the next agenda. So the roadmaps. So we just come up with our Q2 roadmaps, even if it has almost a month past Q2. So I think we had a few modifications to what we intended to. We actually accelerating the Galley Alpha, and that's going to support V1 very soon. We have decided the internal-external format that's make it further making the alpha support will be easier by using the external CRD API group, which is different from the internal one and the existing one. So what we plan to do is by the end of Q2, we try to getting some minimal support of config model v2 with service config. And on the distribution side, we having Galley client and the Galley start to distribute configs with components with Galley clients. Jason will go a little bit detail to that because he has a design to show today. So the roadmap is basically we're gonna finish basic server-side config validation to beta, implementing Galley Alpha, supporting V1, design prototyping service config with a set of features, and the component config distribution daily client. We can start a design consumer config, but may not be. Some of the API governance process, we're gonna start it, and we will still putting our API style linker on part of the API governance process, but we may not end up to do it. So we're cleaning up mesh config, move it to CRD, design service config composition model. That's all comes with P2. So basically we're targeting for those P0s. So any question on the roadmap? Okay, so no more questions. Have questions, you can comment on this talk. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna talk is the the decision on the internal-external CRD design proposal. So this is only for supporting Galley Galley clips.0. Like the first iteration of Galley of syncing two sets of CRD of almost the identical contents. So some of the guidelines, because it's an intermediate solution, which will be replaced in a few months by the full-blown solution. So we try to pick some solution that's kind of allow us to move faster than other solutions. So we kind of listed our kind of different solutions, alternatives, and pros and cons. We end up choosing solution 5, which is we are not going to changing the existing config and the resources and the CRDs. We're going to keep using config DC2IO. So the external CRDs will be in the right API group and the right type and versioning. Those CRDs will be watched by Galley. So once Galley watch those CRDs, and they will convert to the internal config.istio. The good thing is for this to work, the components doesn't need to do any change, because what I learned from changing pilots is changing the API group is actually a deeper model change. That's kind of disruptive. And if we want to support a Galley with different other solutions, like using external API group and internal API group, pilots may end up, and the new changes expected on pilot mixer to switch these two API groups to supporting Galley Alpha. So with solution 5, we don't need to do any of this. When Galley is placed, it's a non-op. It only works when people start writing external facing configs. And it's easy to embed. The major con of this is that we are not using the scopes provided by the API group. So but we still need to require our kind of name to be unique. That's also imposed requirements on our portal message design per API style guide, this to be unique. So some of the kind has a name that fairly generic, that may kind of be reused somewhere else. But at this moment, we don't have any duplicates duplicate kind that need to be worried about. So intermediately, we are good. So there's then we need to do some rollbacks to the CID changes to pilot. That is probably okay. And there's some other cons. Is the one of the major one is the somehow it's not fully friendly with kubectl, because when they resolve the groups, it's kind of implicit. If you have two kind name and the same kind name and different API group, it will end up giving you a default resource from certain groups. So you end up using fully qualified domain name. So there's some alternatives so we can resolve the kind uniqueness, but being the complications we expect, we are not going to do it. So this is summarize the decision and why we made the decision. The main reason is allow us to move faster to the service config model. And the component level, any restrictions we have right now will be removed once we're getting the distribution gRPC stuff kicks in. So any questions? No more questions. Maybe Jason, you want to put, so Jason has a design proposal about component config distribution. So we plan to do a design review after KubeCon in the next working group meetings. But Jason, maybe you want to do an overview of what's, maybe share the doc so people can start looking at it.
Yeah, I'll share it after the. Let me screen share.
Okay.
And just talk through some.
Let me stop the share.
Context. Can I share it from the web? Can you share the video?
Yes.
Can you share?
Yeah, I can share. Hold on.
I just want to cover the problem statement and then a picture of what it might look like.
All right. So.
Okay, so yeah, just look at the problem. The objective is to have a cohesive story for config two components. So make sure palette, Citadel, which is a CA, palette agents. So the problems that we have today are that the components are really too dependent on the API server and etcd for configuration. So that causes issue with testing, development, and partner integrations. Distribution is too coarse, so it's hard to do stuff, things like sharding, canarying. Components have to look at all the config, and we can't gradually roll things out. Component related to rollout, configs and versions. So the components that have a notion of their entire config state, a version for their entire config state. It's kind of split up all over the place. Scroll down. There's poor layering between the user authored config and component config API. I need to fill in that sentence there. But that actually, I didn't take the bullet point out there. So that problem there is that any change to component APIs necessarily requires changing the user APIs and vice versa. So we could decouple that. Gives us some more flexibility. It's just generally good engineering practice, but it gives us flexibility for evolving service config without having to also change components. Config is split across CRDs and config maps and binary flags. Nice to have one way for a component to consume config. And reason about config with all the other things mentioned earlier with subsets of partial views of config and versioning. And it's also inefficient. There's a lot of conversion that each component needs to do, which could be improved. The non-goals are we don't want to replace the API server. That's not, it's still there front and center. For configuration, this is just about the component's API. And some components like file letters filled, and you're going to need to talk to the API server anyway for service registry information. So those are the problems we're trying to solve. If you can scroll down to, that's one of the pictures. I think the first one.
Pictures?
Yeah, the first.
Okay.
So the proposal is to use CRDs and gRPC. CRDs for persistence, editing and observability, all the things that we, that people, the reason people like using Kubernetes. We want to keep that for now. We need to keep that because we need to migrate from wherever we are now to wherever we're going to be. But the component we want to have a subscription model where the component can subscribe to config updates from a config server, Galley in this case. And then we have a Galley would essentially proxy config from a CRD to the subscribed component. And for starters, we're planning to adopt the Envoy's XDS protocol. We'll need to make some changes because they have notions of clusters and endpoints, which isn't relevant to us. But the basic idea is that a component is a client that's subscribing to a server, Galley, and receiving updates that are versioned. You can enact those updates. That's the model we want to start with.
So we are just using their protocol, but we are not planning to use any libraries.
Not using any libraries. We'll have our own. It's going to be copy paste. But instead of trying to start from scratch and define all how the protocol will work and how some of the air conditions, to say start with what they've designed and evolve it to suit our needs. The nice thing about this is they're both watch based, and they both carry. It's data driven. So the names are going to change. So CRD carries a resource, whereas a component would subscribe to configuration and they would be delivered in pieces of config. And those pieces of config, I think we want to call fragments to differentiate what a CRD, what's in a CRD and what a component gets. For starters, it'll be the same thing. So a CRD has a virtual service, and the config fragment that a component would receive would be a virtual service fragment. I haven't written this. I have to update the doc to cover this part. But then day one, we can map it to the current config model, and as we diverge over time, if we need to diverge over time, the resources are clearly CRDs, and the component receives a fragment, and they are not necessarily the same thing. And that goes into more detail about how we track that with the notion of a snapshot and how we might need to redimension config to track incremental rollout, but that's the basic idea. That's probably the detail we go into right now.
Okay, so the doc will be shared after the meeting. Feel free to preview it. We're gonna do a design review after the KubeCon talk.
2 weeks.
2 weeks from now. So it will be May 3rd. We won't be here, so May 10th. So we're gonna have a design review. So so my plan is I will increase the meeting time to 1 hour for the design review. All right. So any other questions? No more questions, and thanks for attending. Bye.